So, Andrew, we're here to talk about what I suspect will be a somewhat controversial book to some members of the financial community. So, tell us what compelled you to write this book.
That very fact is it probably will be controversial. I realized at last December, actually, I was at a holiday party. I didn't know anybody, and someone asked me a question about, what should they do with their account? And after I'd introduced myself, I said I had been an investment advisor, but I wasn't any longer at that point. And they said, "Well, what should I?" And I said, "Well, I think do you have an advisor?" "Yes." "Well, probably should ask your advisor." And so there were other questions throughout the course of that little event where people were asking me about, what's the Federal Reserve going to do, and at its next meeting next week. And I suggested that probably they would do what they've been saying they would do, but that it wouldn't likely be enough for anybody to change their investment strategy. But again, they should just ask their advisor. Anyway, after a bunch of questions like that, I realized that people weren't really engaging their advisors, whom they were paying, okay, a fee. They didn't really have context for various announcements that came out that would impact financial markets, and that they should have some education on that. And then subsequently, I asked some friends about the same things. I said, how much are you paying do you know how much you're paying your advisor? No. Well, maybe you should ask, and you should also ask them what value they add. Uh, and so, and there were a series of questions that I posed to them that they might want to ask, but it was clear that they were not apprised of their account situation. They really weren't sure of what their objectives are, and a number of other things they clearly should have known. So that prompted me to write this book. And the book is about what I think is a fairly straightforward process of investing money for the long term. And why do I say that? Well, I spent a long career doing that for people. So, um, and what I did works. So that's what prompted me to write the book. And it probably will be controversial because it is intended to shine the light on, to bring transparency to the practices of an industry that I think many clients are not aware of. That's the first thing.
So, we know that people didn't even want to go back to their advisor or think about asking their advisor, what should I do with my money now that the economy is in turmoil? So, to me, kind of here's basic questions that you should be able to understand about working with an advisor. But what else have you done in the book to make it accessible to a range of people? Because I know for some people, the mere mention of financial planning or money management is enough to sort of send them into a frenzy of nerves. So how have you tried to make your book accessible for newbie investors and maybe some more experienced investors who still aren't asking the right questions?
Okay, so how have I made it? I've tried to make it accessible by sharing my experiences, and by some narratives that describe people's reactions to what can really be a very challenging process for all of us, for professionals and for individuals. I open the book with the fact that anybody can access prudent investment vehicles for no cost, for no minimum investment. That's how I start the book. So the book is for everybody. It's not just for wealthy people who use investment advisors. Why do where am I going with that? Well, I've tried to make what is an intimidating subject for many a simpler proposition. Okay, and the proposition is this: why should anybody do this? Well, they should do it if they want to preserve the purchasing power of the assets that they've chosen to save. That's for starters. And the best way to have done that over the last 100 years is by investing in stocks. I mean, the stock index that's popular, the Standard and Poor's 500, and I explain what that is, has gone up over 10% a year for nearly 100 years now. Now, that's not without many years of negative markets where people lost in the Great Depression up to 80% of their value, or more recent market crashes, 50+% of their value, or indeed, the one in the COVID scare in February of 2020, where the market lost 34% in 1 month. And that will test anybody's resolve about investing for the long term. But the reality is, investing for the long term is a prudent approach and can be done for little or no cost. What I've tried to do is help people understand the opportunity as well as the risks of doing that and what it takes to remain resolute in a strategy. So I trust that my explanations are simpler. I tried to define terms much as I could. And so I've tried to make it accessible to people, bringing some real life stories to the book as well. And obviously I could not disclose the people involved in these stories, but they are actual client situations over challenging market intervals.
Since you're kind of sort of opening the curtain on how advisors work, and in part because of your past experience, that I would bet financial media, maybe if not skeptical, a little resistant to your book, or at least folks in the industry might wish that you weren't providing this advice.
There is absolutely zero question about that. Okay, we're talking about. All right, let's just back up for a moment. Forget about investments for the moment. Think about the things that have changed in our world in the last 10 and 20 years and how it's changed the way we do things. It's made it more efficient for us to get everyday goods. It's made it more efficient for us to communicate, to get information. And all of those benefits accrue to all of us. And they certainly have accrued to what is called the wealth management industry. But the wealth management industry has not changed its practices at all in the last 20 years, the way it charges people and what it does, in fact, for them. And people should understand that there's an alternative to paying fees. The industry will certainly resist this because the wealth management industry is one of the most attractive sectors for the investment banks and the brokerage firms to be in. Why is that? Because if they get a client under an asset-based fee arrangement, which they all are, they have recurring fees. That's a pretty good thing to have for a business, recurring fees. The next thing is those fees are likely to increase with the market value. The market, after all, has gone up with many interruptions, but nevertheless, over time has gone up about 10% a year. So your revenues are going to grow. Those recurring revenues will grow. And oh, by the way, it doesn't really take any capital to be in that industry. What a fabulous business to be in. If you're an investment bank or a commercial bank, it's a great business, and that's where they're focusing their efforts. And so there's a lot of marketing muscle behind that effort. And I'm here to disrupt the effort, frankly. So no, Kristen, I'm going to like it. They're going to not, they won't want anything to do with it. If they started to become transparent about the way they charge and what they provide in value, in fact, then, and by the way, if they thought they outperformed the stock market, they would be advertising that fact, but none of them do. Okay. And the reason they don't is because they know they don't outperform the stock market. So my point is investors can get the stock market return without using an advisor. It's as simple as that. What's that worth? And I give some examples of what it is worth. Typical fees are 1% management fees for clients. And they're much higher than that, but I'll just say it's 1%. Well, I give some examples of the dollar value that amounts to over a relatively short periods of time, and ask the question, hey, if clients want to pay that money to an advisor with whom they're comfortable, that's great. But they should understand whether or not they're getting value from that relationship, measurable value, not just a comfort factor, and just understand that they pay that advisor every day, as long as they have those accounts with them. So no, the industry is going to resist this. I think there's no question that they'll resist it. And they'll try to find all kinds of reasons that they should be engaged in. What can I say? I think that's a great thing that many people have participated in the stock market through these wealth management advisory relationships. And I hope that a lot of them have actually been able to extract value over the index returns with those relationships. But I think that they owe it to themselves to find out if that's the case. And if that's the case, great, keep the advisor. If it's not the case, then they should consider alternatives.
Yeah, it's almost the age-old story of nobody will watch out for your money as much as you, and therefore you need to be proactive about it. So certainly makes sense to me. Um, what was the most challenging part of writing the book? Was it something, easier than you thought, harder than you thought?
First of all, it was a joy. Let me just say that up front. It was an absolute joy to be able to share the experiences that I've had in professionally, okay, over many decades actually, with people for their benefit. And I thought this is a really good thing to do. So it gave me energy to know that I could enlighten, hopefully, educate, enlighten people about some of the what I think have become almost myths about this industry. And so the challenge really is to bring clarity and vibrance to a subject that, as you say, the minute you say investments, people start to back off. Well, yeah, I don't want to talk about that. And most people, and let's face it, I never raised the subject. That's why, again, going back to this holiday part, I didn't want to talk to people about investments. I wanted to ask them about what their food bank was doing in the community that year. What was the homeless program doing? I didn't want to talk about investments with people who were strangers. That's not something I want to do. That's what I've done professionally, and I'll do it in a relationship, but I don't want to just do it casually. Okay. And I was like, wait a minute, there's something really wrong here. I've got to work. So that's the inspiration that kept me writing. I was completely disorganized. I just wrote whatever came into my head about different experiences I had. And then in working with you, Debbie, and what would Debbie do? And what Debbie would do is she would delete and she would make it clear. And she would ask the hard questions. Weren't really so hard, really, at all. They were just common sense questions that I just didn't really define the answers to very well. So I really focused on trying to keep things in plain English. It's an industry that hides behind a lot of vernacular, a lot of its own, terms that are sometimes pretty goofy, actually. And I talk about that in the book. But the challenge is being clear and vibrant.
So now you've gotten lots of great advice, and there's tons more in Andrew Parrillo's book, Beat the Wealth Management Hustle. I hope all of you will read it soon.